Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the 1994 Fleer Ultra set for baseball. Now, the reason that I'm only doing one set in this video is because 91 through 93 is really one package. Everything that happened during that time really fits together as a story. And then 95 and 96 are kind of a confusing affair where the two sets are very similar, so I wanted to be able to show you kind of the contrast between them. And that left 94 as kind of a standalone set. So that's why I'm going to be looking at it here. And it kind of works for a single video because this is the beginning of when Fleer was putting an insert into every single pack. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of the inserts. But my apologies to you if you feel like this is kind of stretched out, because that's just kind of the nature of how this works. For Fleer, Ultra was an idea that they had to make a really high-end card, not a truly top-of-the-tier high-end card down the road. Basically, this was a premium brand, but they created this card in order to be able to compete with Upper Deck, and they wanted it to be a really nice card. 91, they didn't really pull it off. 92, they very much succeeded. In 93, they continued to carry the strength of it, while Upper Deck was starting to catch up. But still, the 93 set was just about the best card that was put out for that year. For 1994, they wanted to continue to refine it and to really make this ideal for collectors who have a lot of money, basically adults. And so the card was intended to look a lot more elegant. And they'd already done a really good job with this, but they wanted to just really refine it. And the entire industry went this route. 1994 was basically the year where everybody got rid of the borders. Ultra was no exception. For this set, they just had a little band of gold down at the bottom, some gold text up above, a really nice logo, and then that was it. Just a really good image. And of all of their 94 sets, these images I think very clearly are the best images for Fleer Ultra. The cards, they look, on an individual basis, they really do look like great action portraits. They carry beautifully. Every single card just reads. You don't have any confusion as to where the player is. It's very distinct. The card backs got back to having a really bold color on the back, which was a really good move that they made. There's a nice fade in it. It has a certain amount of elegance, but it also has a lot of strength at the same time, so it's a really good combination. And they have a couple of player shots kind of spread out across the card, and the way that it all works is really well balanced. It isn't the most refined card on the card back, but it's still kind of a marriage of all the good things that they'd done previous. So it was a very successful set. And the set, in order to really carry the way that they wanted it to, they needed to just treat it as a truly grown-up set, which means, among other things, no subsets. Now, they hadn't been doing subsets for the previous 2 years, so it's basically 2 series of cards, a whole lot of cards packed in there, to the tune of 600, so it's a lot of player cards, but they all look really good, and this is a set that does work well in terms of collecting the whole thing. You don't really get bored with these cards. The early Upper Deck sets, before they were doing subsets, those cards tended to get really boring because you weren't getting interesting players, but also the cards weren't all that interesting. Here, at least, while they were packing in the sets, they did have enough interest in the cards. And so, for all the minimalist cards of 1994, it's pretty difficult for any card to match up to the Fleer Ultra set, and that was a big plus. Like I said, there were no subsets, but there was one special card, a commemorative card for Major League Baseball's 125th anniversary. Football would also be doing that with the 75th anniversary, but here in the baseball set, they had 125 years for baseball. It's a really nice card. It looks good. It looks really like it should be an SP card as opposed to in the set, but either way, it does look good. The front is a really subdued, very interesting card front, and then the card back just has a write-up. But yeah, that is part of the set. And then again, they did the checklist. And this was the last year that they were going to be doing the checklist, where they have images of players on all the checklists. They wouldn't do that again for a couple more years. So here was the last of this early run of cards with players on the front. And there were 8 checklists. The first checklist including John Doherty. And then there was Mike Matheny and Jose Mercedes, Todd Hundley, John Ursulak, Pete Incaviglia, Andy Van Slyke, and Brian Harvey was the last of the players who were on checklists. So that was the group. Unfortunately, they didn't have a Nolan Ryan or Mike Piazza. They didn't have a really strong star. Pete Incaviglia was about the closest that they got to a strong name in these checklists. So that was unfortunate with the set, but otherwise it still looked really good. But that was it. That was the whole set. It was a 2-series set, a bunch of player cards, 1 commemorative card, and a bunch of checklists. But this was all about inserts. This was the mid-90s, and this was Fleer, so they were all about inserts, and they had a ton. Starting with the all-rookie team. Now this card is a super colorful card. It's a bright color on black. There's kind of a computer graphic plane down at the bottom. There's a silhouette of a mountain behind, and then a big explosion behind, all in one color. So every card, it's really neat to see all of the color that comes through. It's really neat to see the contrast to the black with the player in front. It works pretty well. It is kind of juvenile. It's definitely designed for kids, but hey, I think it looks really good. I have a lot of fun with this card. On the card back, it looks even better because they have a text box that has a big black area, and then it kind of pinches everything else up to really kind of focus it. So these cards do work well. But they also come with a jumbo version, and the jumbo versions came as case toppers. So every single one of these, there are 10 cards in the set, and cases usually come with about 12 boxes. So it's kind of the equivalent of one box topper. It's kind of the rate that these came in. But it came as a complete set, and they're 3.5 by 5 inches. They're otherwise exactly the same. So that is the one version of these cards. Well, there's the autographs, which we'll get to in a second, but other than that, this was the only case where there was a different version of the card. All the other cards were just standalone as they came out of the packs. So the next set was All-Stars. These cards have a really bold color with some text in the back, and the way that all those pieces come together actually read pretty decently. It's kind of a busy card. It is kind of overdone in that regard, but I think it kind of carries pretty well. But kind of a distinction with this set, all the gold foil here is actually replaced with silver foil. So that's what it is. There is not a parallel. It's just silver foil on these. Then there's also award winners, and this is a horizontal card. The card background is kind of a print of gold, not gold foil, but a print of gold, and then the gold foil is on top of that. It's not a really interesting card, but that's the way they did those cards. And then there's career achievements, and here again the card is horizontal. These cards are a lot better. Basically there's a background image of the player, all in a single color of the player's team, and then there's a cutout shot of the player in front. They do look nice. Then they have Ultra Firemen, and this is a set really designed more for kids. Basically, it's a shot of a fire engine with the player in front in a total cutout shot, so there's no combination between the two of them. It really is designed for kids, and in that regard, it might be kind of fun. I think it's just kind of busy. On the card back, the portrait of the player almost could look like it actually fits into the scene. Otherwise, I think it's just an interesting idea for a younger audience, and it's easy to grow out of this, as I clearly have. Then they have hitting machines, and this again uses the silver foil, and also again it's horizontal in the format. And this is an interesting set because the metal-like letters that are in the back just really overpower the entire card. And when you put them in binders, it looks great. It's just you can't see any of the players. So it's an odd card because I love the card. It's just it fails at its most basic responsibility, which is, again, to showcase the players. Then we have Home Run Kings, and this is an interesting card because this is it's more of a chrome finish for the card. It's a black card. It has kind of a stenciled out, well, not a stenciled out, but a line drawing of a random hitter, and then it's contrasted, so they have two of them slightly offset, one with red, one with blue. I have tried to look at these with the red and blue 3D glasses. It doesn't show up. There's no surprise about that. It's just the way that it comes, but it does have that chrome finish, which again is very unusual for Ultra cards. Then they have League Leaders, and I actually really like the League Leaders. These are a full bleed card, a true full bleed card, but they have kind of a fade into a color of the team over the top, so that they could have some text down there, and I think that actually makes the cards look really good. I like the way that it worked, and it makes the cards actually work pretty well as a set too, even though the colors are changing from card to card. But it is a neat trick that they played, and it makes it a card, not necessarily one that you're going to put on showcase. There are a couple others that you're going to do that, but for this, it is one of the better cards, in my opinion, of all of these inserts. Then they have On Base, and On Base is an etched foil card, and it's multiple colors of etched foil. It's kind of an interesting card in that regard. It's not a very interesting design. It's not engaging, but it is a neat idea that they came up with, and it's a unique little insert set that kind of pops out from the rest of these. Then they have their career highlights of Darren Daulton and John Kruk. This is a set where in Series 1 you had Darren Daulton, Series 2 you had John Kruk, and all of these cards do come with the autographs with the seal on them. And in both cases, they came with the typical wrapper redemption. And it's interesting that they basically used two different players from one team. That's the only time that they'd ever done this. They actually tying them together like this in order to make them into one set. but all the text on the back is an interesting, very bold move that they made, which is kind of cool because since the player's name actually ends up in there, it makes the set a little bit distinctive as you go through from the Series 1 to Series 2 cards. And even though I call them career highlights, which is really what they are, they're referred to as Phillies Finest. But either way. Then they have RBI Kings. This is another horizontal card, and it's another chrome card. So it's neat in that regard, and I like the color of the back. The way that this works looks really good. It's more of a subdued card, but this is one of those that you would put on display. Very nice card. Then they have Rising Stars, and here this is another etched foil card, and so but it plays around a lot more, so it has more interesting things going on. It's not a great design, but it's a fun design. That's really the key. And then the Rising Stars text itself, it's kind of prismatic. It almost has little stars in it, so it's a very playful card. Ironically, this is kind of a rare card, but it seems like it's designed more for kids. Then they have Second Year Stars, and here this is a solid color background. It's a team color fade from one color to another with a couple of images of the player in front, and it's a very bold card. It works really well, but it's primarily because of the color on the background, which is kind of like the card backs in the main set. And then finally they have Strikeout Kings, and this is a full bleed card of pitchers, and each pitcher, it shows 3 phases of the pitch all superimposed on the same background, which is a really interesting approach they took. So that was kind of cool. But that was the thing. They just packed a whole bunch of inserts into the set, and you just kind of got to go through one after another after another. What was fun about these was trying to get all of these different individual insert sets finished. I remember that from the day. That was every single Fleer and Ultra set from right in the mid-90s was all about doing this. And it was a blast. And it's really only at the end of the day when you go back and you look and you see what these different cards were like. But there were a lot of fun cards. Now for 1995, they would kind of change the model because they'd start to get into parallels, and they would really kind of get carried away with it. So that's a whole nother story, like I said. But for 1994, it's kind of the transition point where they went from more fun cards to the more mid-90s cards, and right in the middle is this one year where they just tried to make really well-refined cards, and surprisingly the inserts tended to hold up pretty well for baseball. So that was a very unique thing for these cards. But other than that, that's basically all there is to say about this. So I hope that you learned something from the video. I hope that you'll check out other videos I've done. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And thank you very much for watching.